It's the early 1990s, and Kodak, the company credited with popularizing photography, a global titan rated one of the world's 5 most valuable brands, is at a crossroads. Having invented the first digital camera back in 1975, now, almost 2 decades later, Kodak is still clinging to its traditional analog film business, refusing to acknowledge the reality of a new digital revolution emerging in the industry. Suffering from a staggering loss of relevance in this market, which also included the earliest smartphones, Kodak, who once employed over 145,000 workers worldwide, with revenues of almost $16 billion, slid into irrelevance, filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2012. So, what went wrong? And how can you learn from Kodak's mistakes to get great results for both your business and your career? Hi, my name is Raf. Welcome to RISR, where my mission is to help you go further faster. The story of Kodak is a cautionary tale for both companies and individuals who fail to understand the importance of stakeholder management. You see, deep within the company, former employees have described a culture that was risk-averse and slow to adapt to change, reluctant to fully embrace digital photography as an emerging business, despite having the early technological advantage a full 20 years ahead of everyone else. And this was largely due to internal resistance from stakeholders who were so resistant to shifting their perspectives that right in front of their eyes, they allowed Kodak to lose its market leadership as digital photography became mainstream. Recent research from McKinsey suggests that transformations are 4 times more likely to succeed when influential employees who have a significant voice within the organization are involved. So, with effective stakeholder management, Kodak could have pivoted its model to become the leader in digital photography. The same principles apply to any other business initiative, or any other work that involves aligning people towards a common goal. So, in this video, I'm going to cover the basics of stakeholder management, why it's so important to your career in particular, and how to get started today. First, let's talk about who your stakeholders are. In simple terms, stakeholders are anyone who can influence or affect a piece of work, anyone who is affected by that work, or anyone interested in that work, usually because they're affected by it in some way. And stakeholder management is the process of identifying and then analyzing and prioritizing the needs and interests of these stakeholders. It also includes developing and implementing strategies to then effectively engage and manage those stakeholders to achieve your goals. It can be applied to anything really, from politics to business and right down to the individual and your relationships with friends and family. With this in mind, there are a few different types of business stakeholder management worth knowing about. Firstly, internal stakeholder management, which is all about managing stakeholders within your organization. And the organization, if you apply the definition broadly, can be your company or your department or even your team or project. Then there's external stakeholder management, which focuses on managing stakeholders outside your organization, such as your customers and your suppliers. Intercompany stakeholder management is all about relationships between companies. And I'm also going to quickly mention project stakeholder management because it's such an important aspect of successful change. Now, this is just to get you thinking about different types of stakeholders, and you might need to consider one or more of them at any time if you want to be successful. But to illustrate how the basics of business stakeholder management works in a more common situation than the Kodak case study, let me tell you a completely fictional story about Jane. Now, Jane, a recent university graduate with a bachelor's degree in marketing, just landed her first job at a local grocery store, and boy, is she excited to start working and paying back that student debt. Like I said, completely fictional. Anyway, on her first day, she's asked to stock the shelves with some new inventory, a range of gluten-free, low-carb, high-protein snacks which arrived that morning. Jane starts working diligently, stocking those shelves, but after a while, she realizes that she doesn't have enough space to fit everything in. Using the knowledge she gained from all those years studying marketing, she becomes concerned that the shelves are extremely cluttered, creating confusion for customers and impacting sales. There's already boxes of goods in the aisles and different items all mixed up together, and now, with even more stock coming, she's worried it's going to make the situation much, much worse. So she decides to discuss it with her colleague, Andrea. Now, at first, Andrea didn't think it was a problem at all, but Jane showed her, by observing the behavior of customers, that they were becoming confused, not finding what they were after, having trouble figuring out the price of things, and many of those customers ended up walking out of the store without buying anything. Andrea then realizes that she had had many customers come to her with what she thought were silly questions over the past few weeks, but that this was likely caused by the overflowing stock situation. Next, Jane decides to speak with her store manager Dante to discuss the issue. So he fires her on the spot. No, he doesn't fire her. He explains that due to recent marketing efforts, including a human billboard standing outside promoting these new products, there's been a massive increase in demand for this range, so he's ordered extra stock, and there's even more on the way. But even though he now has at least twice the number of customers coming into the store, he's not really selling much more than he was before. It was then that Jane recognized the human billboard, Brad, her post-grad tutor. But unlike Brad, who's doing this during his summer break, after which he'll join his dad's advertising agency as VP of Marketing, Jane knows that she needs to work harder to add extra value and impress her boss if she wants to go further, faster in her career. Understanding the need to both accommodate the extra inventory and make things easier for customers to find, Jane suggests to her boss that they make more space and create a special section for the new products by reorganizing the store layout, including placing some of the slower moving items on the very top and the very bottom shelves, and also storing some bulkier items which are taking up a whole lot of space in the stockroom at the back of the store, which she suggests could have not one but 2 extra levels of new shelving added to maximize vertical storage space. Thanks to her proactive stakeholder management skills, Jane and the store manager worked together to implement the solution. He even got some of the other staff to help. Together, they create a new layout that not only accommodates the extra inventory, but also makes it easier for customers to navigate the store and find what they're looking for really easily. And as a result, the store sees an immediate 35% increase in sales. Over the coming weeks, Jane continues improving the layout even more, and the store becomes the destination for gluten-free, low-carb, high-protein products, as well as kombucha and cognac, which was Jane's idea after speaking with some of the customers. Not only did she get promoted to assistant store manager to help grow the business even more, but Jane discovered that she could add incredible value to virtually any business by understanding and building relationships not only with the boss, but also other stakeholders, customers, co-workers, and even Brad the billboard, who, a few short years later, running his family's sizable advertising agency, hires Jane as his VP of Marketing. Don't hate on me for Brad's success. His father Bill made some smart investments into local politicians who then hired Bill for big jobs, and he passed his expertise in managing different types of stakeholders in a different way down to young Master Bradley. Hopefully, this little story illustrated how stakeholder management can improve your job performance, build trust, and accelerate your career. Stakeholder management is something that you should be doing as part of your everyday job. And as Jane's story shows, proactive stakeholder management can, in a very real way, not only help you overcome challenges and find solutions to problems, but achieve this without having to do everything yourself. Now, if you're looking to advance your career in any way, consider this. No matter how skilled or talented you are, you just can't do it all in a vacuum. Your success really does depend on the support of others, whether it be colleagues, clients, customers, or anyone else. So your ability to navigate these relationships, build trust and rapport, and engage your stakeholders in achieving common goals will set you apart from the rest. So, you might be asking, how do I do this in my job? Well, kind of the same way as Jane, but her story lacked a lot of detail, so I'm going to break it down for you a little more so that you can apply the principles to any initiative. Now, the first step you'll need to take is to identify your stakeholders. Think about your role. What are your job priorities? And then think about the associated activities. So if you're Jane in her new VP marketing role, you need to think about those revenue targets, marketing strategies, and so on. Then think about your internal stakeholders. In this example, typical internal stakeholders could be your manager, colleagues, direct reports, and other departments that you work with or that you rely on. Now do the same with your external stakeholders, like your customers, suppliers, and industry groups. This is just a brief summary, by the way. Everything I talk about in this video, I'm going to break down in a lot more detail in upcoming videos, so keep an eye out for those. I'll link them below. So you'll end up with a list of stakeholders, which you'll then need to prioritize. Now, there are various ways to do this, but basically you're going to need to decide how important each stakeholder is to your objectives. One way to figure out how important different stakeholders are is through the following method. Firstly, by assessing their level of influence or power, which I think of as their ability to affect your role. So this includes their ability to make decisions that affect your role, to provide resources, and their ability to affect outcomes of your work. Your manager or supervisor, a major client or business partner are some obvious examples here, but this could really be anyone who has the ability to affect your role deeply. Then figure out a practical rating system that works for you, such as high, medium, low, scoring from 1 to 10, or whatever, and rate each stakeholder on that basis. Now, once you understand their power, then for each of your stakeholders, you can assess their level of interest. Just because stakeholders have high power doesn't mean they're interested in your role or what you're doing. Maybe that's a good thing and maybe not, but we're looking at them separately. Their level of interest can include how closely their own work and objectives are tied to your role, or how much they stand to gain or lose based on your actions. Typically, stakeholders who have a higher level of interest could be your peers, key customers, your team if you're a manager, and your boss. And once again, you'll need to rate each stakeholder, but be sure to use the same rating system as you used for their level of power. Now, as I mentioned, there are various ways to prioritize your stakeholders, but these two factors, power and interest, are a popular and easy way to do this, sometimes referred to as Mandelow's matrix. Once your stakeholders are rated, the prioritization exercise is pretty straightforward. Obviously, stakeholders who have high power and high interest are incredibly important to you, and these key players should be given highest priority. You'll need to actively engage with them and manage them closely, or they could do a lot of damage. Stakeholders with high power but low interest might still have a significant impact on your success, so it's still important to keep them satisfied, because if they are not satisfied, they might become interested, pushing themselves and other dissatisfied stakeholders into the previous quadrant, which could be an enormous problem for you. Moving along, stakeholders with high interest but low power require less attention, depending on what you're trying to do, but you still need to keep them well informed because, again, if they become unhappy, they could join with other unhappy low power individuals, and guess what? That group all of a sudden gains power and influence, and then you're in trouble. And lastly, those with low power and low interest are pretty unlikely to care enough to resist whatever you're trying to change, so apart from keeping them informed from time to time, you probably won't have to put too much effort into them. Once you've identified and prioritized your stakeholders, the next step is to build meaningful relationships with them. Start by understanding your stakeholders, their perspective, their goals, and their concerns. How can you do this? Well, you can ask them questions and engage them in conversation to build trust and rapport, and in reality, this is likely to be a mixture of formal and informal conversations. But whether it's in a meeting, a company event, or over lunch, make sure you build up a portfolio of understanding around your most important stakeholders, their style, their expectations, their likes, their dislikes, and so on. In layman's terms, what makes them tick? What turns them off? And what turns them on? In a strictly business sense, come on. So, why is this important? Well, ultimately, by demonstrating that you understand their needs and priorities, you can then build a foundation for a strong and productive relationship with them. You'll gain their trust and respect, and you'll create a mutually beneficial partnership to help you achieve your objectives and accelerate your career growth. If you want to take this a step further, you can actually develop a full stakeholder management plan that outlines the key stakeholders, their needs, and the best way to engage them. It's a topic for another episode, so keep an eye out for that one. Don't be fooled though. Building meaningful relationships takes some time and effort, and there are quite a few methods that you can use, but to get you started, here are my top 3 relationship building tactics. Firstly, communication. Number 1 for me, no question. Because it's absolutely essential to communicate regularly and effectively with your stakeholders, keeping them informed about your progress and any challenges you might be facing, allowing you to demonstrate your commitment to delivering value and achieving shared goals. So, communicate early, communicate often, and communicate clearly. And part of this is to also understand their preferences for how and when to communicate with them. Number 2 on the list is conflict resolution, in my personal opinion anyway. When you work with different stakeholders, you'll encounter varying degrees of conflicting interests and priorities. I've personally found that whether these conflicts are obvious or subtle, they exist almost everywhere much of the time. And by conflicts, I don't necessarily mean fighting in the way that you might imagine. I mean stakeholders who are not aligned with each other, just not in agreement, which can make getting stuff done really, really difficult. And why is this so often the case? Well, for one thing, people, us humans, have different beliefs, attitudes, and values. Yet, we have this crazy tendency to frame situations assuming that other people think exactly the same way as we do, which of course is a bit of a problem. There are other reasons as well, but I can often draw many or most stakeholder conflicts back to this basic human truth. So, what can you do about it? Well, by actively seeking out and listening to the perspectives and opinions of your stakeholders and proactively addressing conflicts head on, in the right way of course, you can build stronger relationships and find solutions that benefit all parties involved. You can literally become the glue that brings conflicting stakeholders together, and they'll appreciate you for it. In my personal opinion, the key here is to find specific areas of agreement first, which reduces the scope of discussions, and then move to specific areas of disagreement and solve as many of those as possible, reducing the points of disagreement down to where the parties are prepared to negotiate the final points, usually by making some small concessions. And then, of course, capturing all of this in writing for them so that they now find themselves bound by a sort of social contract. And the third tactic I think worth mentioning here is persistence. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Stakeholder engagement is challenging, and it can be very difficult at times. It takes a lot of effort. Stakeholders are not always available, and when they are, they don't always want to or like being engaged, and sometimes they're uncooperative or rude, combative, or just plain old disinterested. Of course, until the change actually happens and they complain bitterly. You might feel at times that you're in a losing battle, but the reality is that you don't really have a choice if you want to get it right. So, persistence is super important. If things get difficult, the key is don't give up too quickly, keep working at it, keep communicating, keep building relationships. In the short term, if you consciously use stakeholder management, it'll definitely help you. But over time, you'll be amazed at what a difference it makes to your results and your career. And now for the bad news. This was just an overview. So the things we covered here, how to identify, prioritize, and engage stakeholders, will be all broken down in more detail in future episodes, starting with the first step, how to identify your stakeholders like a pro, which, when it's available, you can grab here, or wait another 10 seconds until it appears again on the end screen. And of course, if you're still here, then we both know that you're a happy stakeholder of mine, so please smash the like button, and then smash the subscribe button, and then smash the notification bell. Destroy the notification bell so that you don't miss out on future episodes when they're released. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend or colleague, helping them to go further faster as well. Till next time, keep rising.